Shabbat Shalom. Wrestling with the divine. How do we know when we've won? If we're going to be honest, it's likely we'd have to confess to mixed feelings about family reunions. On the one hand, how wonderful to have a chance to see a favorite cousin who's moved to Sydney a while ago and is coming back for this occasion. On the other, it's possible you'll have to witness your second cousin reprise his performance from last time when he imbibed just enough to feel free to tell the entire family what he thinks of us before helping himself to the buffet laid out by the very relations he just unmercifully mocked. And well, there's also the unappetizing prospect you'll have to please your great aunt by eating a bit of her kugel, a dish that would be condemned in the courts of gastronomy and cardiology. You're probably not afraid that it will actually kill you. Not so for Jacob. He heads for his reunion with his older brother Esau with justified trepidation. Jacob had not only baited Esau into giving him his birthright, but he deceived their father, posing as Esau so that Isaac, blind and near death, would confer his blessing on him. We can imagine that Jacob travels off to greet Esau, knowing that his brother, no blameless naif, who's had years to nurture his resentment, may use this moment to take his revenge. And when Jacob's messengers inform him, Esau himself is coming to meet you and there are 400 men with him, Jacob has good reason to fear the worst. 400 men under the command of an indignant, impulsive, and vengeful sibling is not kugel. Excuse me. So here we see Jacob at his weakest. He does the equivalent of what we call today throw money at the problem. He sends gifts, livestock, and slaves, and instructs his messengers to specify that these treasures have been sent by Esau's, servant, Jacob. Jacob has taken the role of a supplicant from that most basic, and in his case rational, fear for his life. In this role as supplicant, Jacob also turns to prayer. But it's an unusual type of prayer. Rather than simply plea for protection from his brother's vengeance, Jacob challenges God to make good on a promise. Oh, save me from the hand of my brother, lest he come and strike me, mother, with sons. Yourself said, I will surely deal well with you, and I will set your seed like the sand of the sea, multitudinous beyond all count. In other words, if you really meant what you said, Adonai, you will allow me, my wives, and my children to survive this encounter. In fact, we see Jacob is less supplicant than party to a deal. He's not asking God for anything other than that God live up to his side of it. What happens next could be interpreted as a peculiar answer to Jacob's unconventional prayer, but it's far more than that. It's a pivotal moment for Jacob and a determinative, literally defining moment for us. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. And he, this mysterious man, saw that he had not won out against Jacob. And he said, let me go, for dawn is breaking. But Jacob answered, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, no, not Jacob. So your name hence be said, but Israel, for you have striven with God and men and won out. We don't know with whom Jacob struggled that night. It remains cryptic to us and a matter of contention among biblical scholars to this day. But Jacob believed the man to be the embodiment of the divine, because Jacob called the name of the place of their encounter Pain Uel, meaning I have seen God face to face, and I came out alive. Jacob came out not only alive, but triumphant. Rashi observed that in insisting this divine being bless him, Jacob, now Israel, vindicates himself for having received his father's blessing by deceit. Jacob, Israel, has rectified himself and acquired the moral strength and authority to confront his brother. The moment Jacob wrests this vindicating blessing from his mysterious adversary, Jacob knows he has won. He is Israel, as defined by his night visitor, one who was striven with God and men and won out. A defining moment for Jacob, to be sure. But in what way was this a defining moment for us? Think about how we Jews are referred to throughout Scripture and associated commentary. Are we children of Abraham? Children of Isaac? Are we children of Sarah? Or Moses? Or David? Or God? No. We are B'nai Yisrael, children of he who struggled with the divine and with men and prevailed. Our legacy is to struggle with the divine, not to be complacent in the belief that all that is God's will, but to challenge God to make good on his deals, to live up to the code of justice he bequeathed to us, to fulfill his end of the bargain. It's in our name. In relation to God and humanity, we are adversaries and partners in pursuit of divine justice and an ideal world. In his illuminating book, Pious Irreverence, biblical scholar Dov Weiss chronicles over 50 accounts of challenges to God's authority within Scripture, many of which are familiar to us. Abraham challenges God at Sodom and Gomorrah. Moses challenges God to spare some of those who worship the calf. Jacob not only challenges God, but puts him on trial. Yet the rabbis of the Second Temple question the legitimacy of these challenges. Any such challenge to God is predicated on the concept of God's moral fallibility, a concept they abhorred to the extent they prohibited Jews to challenge Adonai. This, despite the well-documented challenges in Scripture from Abraham straight through the prophets. Weiss contends that the rabbinic insistence on a morally irreproachable God was a response to early Christian theologians such as Marcion of Sinope, who contrasted the evil creator God of the Hebrew Bible, hubristic, angry, with a penchant for war, against the good Lord of the New Testament. By insisting there never were and could not be legitimate challenges to God, the rabbis hoped to slam the door on such critics and critiques, thus lessening the appeal of Christianity and weakening its potential to marginalize Jews. And yet, Tanakh does present a God who created us in love and trust, but can be tempestuous, impulsive, and slow to intervene to help us sort our predicaments. Throughout our journey, the fate of our people hinged on those amongst our forebears who were willing to call God out for threatening the very things God instructed us to value: life, justice, and his bountiful earth. It is in our name, then, to contend with God. This leaves one question. How do we know when we've won? For Jacob, it was fairly straightforward. He won legitimate claim to the blessing. But for us, it is when we see things going wrong and take it upon ourselves to make them right. Consider an example from this week. EcoPeace, the Israeli, Jordanian, Palestinian Conservation and Peacebuilding NGO, announced a groundbreaking pact for a UAE-funded solar farm in the Jordanian desert. Energy harvested from this farm will provide clean power to Israel, which will use it to build a desalination plant on the Mediterranean coast, providing potable, agrarian-grade water to Jordan. This agreement will cut carbon emissions throughout the region, lessening the impact of climate change on the poor, ensuring clean water for consumption and agriculture for people whose lives and livelihoods are under threat from drought. Moreover, this pact sets a precedent for peace building through cooperative, innovative climate change intervention in other similarly troubled parts of the world. We, the people who struggle with the divine and with one another, know we have won when we see our society shunning the stranger and intervene to welcome refugees, when we see a government deny support for the destitute and insist that help be provided. When we see suffering, and we do what we can to alleviate it. When we experience an inexplicable loss, and we're able to turn to others for consolation and compassion. When, in brief, we beat God at his own game, looking after the world that he created in love and has left in our care. Shabbat Shalom.